so that she's done it. Great. All right. Our first speaker, Jim Sims, is a native New Yorker who moved to Tampa Bay in late 2003. He retired as Director of Community Relations with Youth and Family Alternatives, Inc., an area nonprofit, in July 2013. Jim's been a Toastmaster since October 1997, joined EZ Speakers Toastmasters on Long Island. He's also a member of Tampa Toastmasters 1810, the Bob Turel Sandwich Evaluators, an online evaluation only club which was started last year. And in 2004, Jim met the sandwich man, Bob Turel. Most of us here met him. In fact, he came here and gave us the wisdom of evaluation 3 or 4 years ago. Mike Landrum, a professional speaker, speech writer, and speaker's coach, said in A Habit of Courage, I guess that most people come to Toastmasters in order to overcome their fear of public speaking. I love going to meetings because I know at the very least I will see a demonstration of courage. We all feel more vulnerable when standing before a group of attentive listening. A mantle of leadership descends on our shoulders, and with it, the weight of responsibility, expectation, and opportunity. 2014, Jim was the District 48 Toastmasters Evaluation Champion. Tonight, he shares some lessons about courage in Toastmasters, the title of his speech, 19 years of sandwiches, yet hungry for more. Please welcome.
Today, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth. Lou Gehrig, on July 4th, 1939, Lou Gehrig Appreciation Day, something you may remember. He was the first baseman of the New York Yankees, played 2,130 consecutive games, which was eventually, after many, many years, eclipsed by Cal Ripken, played 2,632 consecutive. What you do, speak so loudly, I cannot hear what you say. That was Ralph Waldo Emerson. What's amazing is I remember that quote in the front of the very first Toastmaster manual handed to me in 1997, the Competent Toastmaster manual. I actually achieved 2 of those CTMs in my journey. Jim, that was a great speech. I can't wait until your next one. That could have been any anonymous Toastmaster in the many clubs that I belong to over 25 plus years. One of those not so useful evaluations. How many of you as Toastmasters may have had a similar speech, a similar evaluation? They provide nothing. They don't help uplift you. They don't help you grow at all. And the Toastmaster who's doing that evaluation might just think of you as an accomplished Toastmaster, someone who's legendary. I had the opportunity in 2004 to join the West Pasco Toastmasters Club 2 months after I moved to Florida. I renewed that journey, that Toastmaster journey that I was on. And oftentimes when you're an experienced Toastmaster, someone's going to say, oh, we need you to be an officer. And sure enough, the West Pasco Toastmasters did that. And then they also said, you got to go to the TLI down in Pinellas County. So we wanted to make sure that we got the points and that we were distinguished. So I followed their advice and I walked into the conference, did my training on the officer role that I had, And so I had time on my hands and I looked on the agenda. What could I do? So I walked into an evaluation workshop by Bob Turel. And what I did is I ended up taking about 3 pages of notes, and I realized why he was beginning to be thought of as the sandwich man. He was the most professionally dressed person I saw at that TLI, and he's always impressed me with his attire. And when Bob gives feedback, it's always out of the box. It's coloring outside of the lines. And I've been sharing my speeches with Bob for the last 5 years. I put them on Carolwood Toastmasters YouTube. You can go to Carolwood Toastmasters, you can see James Sims, and you can see some of those speeches. I've even occasionally shared that feedback that I got from Bob on that particular speech. So some of Bob's advice that was positive, he said, effective use of a quote while reading from notes, excellent eye contact, and placing the notes on the table when done. I thoroughly enjoyed your speaker introduction, well thought out and relevant to the audience. I enjoyed your use of personal stories. He also said, one of the best examples of an educational speech with panache, relevance, and gusto for the topic. And Bob always gave opportunities. He even said to me one time, you gestured too much, suggesting that I might even put a hand in my pocket with brought a chagrin and a look on John Morris's face that I couldn't repeat. But he said the amount of swaying. I do sometimes sway, I'm trying to rid it myself. He said that if I come out from behind the lectern, that might help. He also suggested writing notes to kind of encourage myself not to sway. And he said that about my presentation, you tell a heartening and inspiring story, which seems by now to be part of your own life's fabric. I'd like to see you work on a pace at which speaking perhaps slower and longer pauses. Now, I could give you maybe 25 other suggestions, but we don't have all that much time. In a 1900 sermon entitled The Life That Lasts, Ralph Waldo Emerson's quote was presented as an important earmark to think about. And I've often used Ralph Waldo Emerson, what you do, speak so loudly I cannot hear what you say, to emphasize the gestures that should be in your speech, rather than perhaps concentrating so much on the words. But yet Emerson's quote, what you do, speak so loudly, I cannot hear what you say. Maybe in today's vernacular, it might be actions speak louder than words. It has so much more relevance to a life that matters. Emerson also said, let us be silent that we may hear the whispers of the gods. My experience with the Bob Turel Sandwich Evaluators, which started in April of 2022, I was encouraged to join by the woman who was setting it up. That first meeting, there was 23 people in attendance. It was amazing. And I joined specifically because it was relevant to Bob. It was a testimonial to Bob, who has been fighting a debilitating disease for the last 4 years. And it was something that I thought really mattered. Today it's struggling. And I think that what we really need to do is ask the members, why did you join? Why aren't you coming to meetings? Ask District 48, shouldn't a club like this matter? And I believe that it definitely is something that we should pay attention to and change that dynamic. On Lou Gehrig Appreciation Day, Lou said, for the past 2 weeks, you've been reading about a bad break. Yet today, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth. Lou was 36 that day, and he died 2 years later. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, is now colloquially known as Lou Gehrig's disease. It's rare, it's incurable, it's a neurological disease where motor neurons in your brain and spinal cord are affected, and voluntary muscle movement like chewing walking and talking are impacted. And I learned from Bob that he had this before it was even identified as ALS. In the story of that day of July 4th, 1939, it said that Joe McCarthy, Yankees manager, whispered encouragement to him, and Lou hobbled to the bank of microphones. Gehrig did not have a written speech to deliver, and no actual copy of it appears to exist. Had he forgotten it in his locker? Had he, after working on it the day before with his wife Eleanor, as she has said, discarded any drafts and decided to deliver it extemporaneously? That would have been a bold and risky decision given Lou's shyness and lack of experience at giving speeches. Whatever his preparation, Gehrig delivered a magnificent speech, short, memorable, and filled with gratitude, despite the diagnosis of ALS that had forced him to retire and endure the growing indignities of a body that was betraying him. You wouldn't be wrong if you called that speech on July 4th, 1939, baseball's Gettysburg Address. I also remember reading Tuesdays with Maury by Mitch Albom. Mitch Albom was a sports reporter, and he heard about the story of Maury on Nightline. And 16 years before, he was the most important professor at Brandeis University in Mitch's life. Mitch made all the intentions of staying in touch, but it never happened. And in August 1994, Maury Schwartz was diagnosed himself with ALS. And what's amazing is, just like the Iron Horse, just like Lou Gehrig, Maury called himself lucky. And Mitch Albom, when reflecting on that, said, when I read his explanation to using this word, I understand what he means. He suggests doing what Buddhists do, which is every day, have a little bird on your shoulder who asks, is today the day? Am I ready? Am I doing all I need to do? Am I being the person I want to be? Any of you do the ice bucket challenge? Maybe think back. 2014, it went viral. I remember my son Brian inviting me to do the ice bucket challenge to reflect on the importance of ALS. It wasn't necessarily all that successful in raising money, but it certainly raised awareness about the disease. In my opinion, living with ALS takes incredible courage. It's a progressive disease and there's no cure. And so whether it was Lou Gehrig, Maury Schwartz, or Bob Turel, I admire them for their courage and their perseverance. I believe the Bob Turel Sandwich Evaluators was a club that I should have joined. I'm glad that I did join, but I'm looking for all the help I can get to keep this club going. Because I can tell you, the evaluations at Toastmasters sometimes aren't what they should be.